I just wanted some clarification on tithing.
Being unable to forgive somebody who causes an offense
Does
towards
it really matter whether someone is Protestant or Catholic?
The genealogies are different from Matthew to Luke.
I was wondering what the Bible said in terms of what I should do.
This is Pastor's Perspective. We're here every Monday through Friday providing answers on a variety of topics, including the Bible, end times, other religions, and the family. Call right now with your question at 1-888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173. You can also post your question at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
Thank you so much for having us on today on the Pastor's Perspective program. We are ready to go with your questions on the Bible and the Christian faith, just about anything that's on your mind. Give us a call, 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173, in the studio with Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and Bobby Conway from OneMinuteApologist.com. Welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
Well, it's great to be here. Yeah, on this beautiful drizzly day, which the drizzle sometimes becomes a shower.
Yes.
But you know what they say. April showers bring May
scours.
May what? What?
Flowers.
Flowers.
Bobby,
okay.
It's flowers, not scours.
Okay. April showers bring May scours?
Maybe in North Carolina. I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, North Carolina has been really warm. They're getting good weather. And then I saw that Dallas, God forbid, 91 degrees it's supposed to be today.
Whoa.
So
Is that right?
those in Texas.
Well, maybe that's
peace.
that wind that we heard about yesterday getting blown on.
Kenneth Copeland.
That's right.
That's
right.
Yes. What was the name of that? He was going to be blowing out a heat wave.
Blowing a heat wave.
The heat wave is maybe showing up in Texas.
Isn't he in Texas? I think he's from Texas.
Yeah, so
Oklahoma,
he might.
somewhere like
Sadly,
that.
he might be interpreting it as.
Yeah, he probably is. And he's going on air telling his followers, see, it's working. Send me more money.
Yes, now it's going to spread out through the rest of the.
Yeah.
You know.
Which reminds me, I forgot to tell our call screener to leave a line open in case Kenneth Copeland does call in today. We'd
love to talk.
We gave an
yeah.
open invitation yesterday, so maybe he'll call.
I lost a Facebook person put adios after I posted the video because the
They were
person was
offended,
like, "Well, he's using his authority," and I certainly didn't get in any argumentation about it. But I think, isn't it funny though, when things living in North Carolina, it was funny. Anytime I'd hear something going on in California, so we got all this bad weather, you would listen to people talk sometimes, and because of California and how liberal it is, God's judgment must be falling there, or California's about to fall off the face of the earth. So I could just picture Copeland, the heat waves in Dallas, and look, California, man, they're getting storms like crazy right now.
Yep.
Okay, reel me in, Brian.
Okay, so just to give some context to our listeners, probably is a good idea. So recently, a guy named Kenneth Copeland, who's been around for decades, he's been part of the Word Faith movement, a major leader in the Word Faith movement, and a bona fide heretic. I don't use that word lightly, but he really qualifies. So he basically claims to, he's made a statement to the effect that. He is he's a little God. He's become a God just like God. So when Jesus said, "I am" in John chapter 8, taking the name of divinity to himself, Copeland said when he gets up in the morning, he looks in the mirror and he just basically does the same thing. He just says, "I am." So that's why he thinks he has the authority to blow a hot wind on the coronavirus and kill it, because he's got God-like powers. And that's just bona fide heresy. So that's why we're drawing attention to this. And it's a pretty, it's kind of a tragically humorous video, because he just looks so absolutely ridiculous. And the guys along with him who it just doesn't seem like they're quite as into it, but they must be on the payroll, so they had to kind of go along. So anyway, I'm sorry if that's offending anyone out there. There are those times. I mean, Elijah the prophet did mock the prophets of Baal. So, there are times when you just got to say, stop the madness, stop the nonsense. This is utterly absurd.
Yeah.
And of course, this is picked up by all kinds of news agencies. And what are they doing with it? They're holding out. They're going, look at these stupid Christians, you know. And they got him as an evangelical. So here it is. Another,
we get mocked.
Yeah. Here's another evidence that evangelicals are lunatics. Yes. So we're here to give the other side of the story. But moving on from that, so yesterday, you guys know, we had a little prayer here for Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, and I was able to spend some time with some friends on a Zoom call today, some pastors in the UK. And one of my friends was telling me about another friend of ours who wasn't part of the conversation who knows the doctor that's treating the prime minister, and the doctor is an absolute solid believer and is sharing the gospel with the prime minister. So, and awesome. and actually, like I said, Brian, you asked me yesterday about Boris Johnson's, where he stands spiritually. He does have he actually does claim to be a Christian. He has made that claim, and he does have some background. I've heard him say some things and so forth, but he certainly hasn't been any kind of a outstanding voice for the gospel, but you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe being in ICU with the coronavirus will kind of change his perspective on a lot of things. So, yeah. So
Very
keep praying for him. And, he's actually doing quite well. So they say that he's stable. He hasn't even needed a ventilator. So
hasn't it been great seeing just the amount of prayer going on? I mean, people praying outside of maybe hospitals, abortion clinics. I saw a video today of our old worship pastor and his wife. They just sent out notes to the community, and then everybody came out to the grass, and they're just leading. And I think they're just leading in worship. I didn't push play, but I'm almost certain that's what they'd be doing. And they were like, why did it take the coronavirus for us to invite neighbors out in the lawn to do this? And people are getting so creative. And I think that we can get routine, and I'm excited about the innovation of ministry and ideas that are going to be birthed out of this time.
Yeah, there's some amazing stuff. I saw a video the other day, and this was in a UK context, and it was a vicar. We talked about the vicar of Christ yesterday. It was a local Anglican vicar, a young guy, kind of looked like you, Bobby, and he pulled up in his car, parked along a street, and just a typical row of houses, in a British community, and he got out a little microphone and a little amplifier, and he just set up. And he just started, nobody's on the street or anything. And he just starts talking. He's talking to the houses. Yeah. And he just starts talking like really, just expressing like just tenderness and graciousness.
Yeah,
and,
not screaming at him.
If you're fearful, I'm here today. And I just wanted to come out and tell you that, I'm going to lead us in a prayer. I'm going to lead us in the Lord's Prayer. And so as he's doing this, people just start coming out of their houses. They start looking out their windows, and pretty soon he's got people lined up all up and down the street. And then he plays Amazing Grace. He does it on some kind of an amplified thing. He doesn't play it himself, like sing it and play it, but he plays a recording of it. And then people are gathering around, and then he just leads everybody in Our Father who art in heaven. And I'm just watching this like, so cool. This is amazing.
Absolutely.
And it was innovative, it was courageous, and it was compassionate. It was really beautiful. It was great.
One last thing I would say about one good piece that I really think will come out of it is the new atheism movement for the last several years. They've lost some headway the last couple of years, but there still has been some vitriolic atheism that has sought to eradicate belief in God by minimizing it, by making it all just seem absurd and ridiculous. I really think that it's going to be hard for people to not be more accepting of people having a spiritual voice, a Christian voice, a religious voice, because we have seen that how much in this trial universally throughout the world that we're responding. to God. And I think that's going to take some time for us to forget that. We do, unfortunately, forget things. But I think if some of the fights that we are fighting before to have a voice, I think it's going to be a harder battle for those trying to get rid of our voice than it is for us to keep ours now.
Yeah, I think so too, because even though there still are those negative voices like, trying to capitalize on crazy people who claim to be evangelical.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I read a statistic where, we saw like the Rodney Howard Brown, we saw him doing his church service, but 98% of the churches in the country complied with the request of their governors or the federal recommendations to shut down their churches. 98%. So a mere 2%, held out, and even most of them have come along. But I think that's a good witness right there. Because we're not benefiting by doing this. Where it's hurting us in a sense. It's certainly hurting us economically and so forth. But what a great way to just say, well, we love our neighbors. We don't want to see anybody get sick, so we're gonna go with it. I think, I agree with you. I think that's absolutely true. Those voices are going to become less and less significant in the culture, right?
Well, that'd be great.
Because people don't want to hear that right now.
They
don't want to hear Dawkins talking about how, well, this is just what it is. This is what it's supposed to be. What are we all worried about? Because that would be what Dawkins would have to say if he's consistent with his own views, right?
Well, people would jump all over him right now. And so it's interesting how tides can change so fast.
Amazing. So did we talk about this yesterday? I think it was a different meeting I was in. But the whole Jesus changed my life thing, did we talk about that?
That does not sound familiar.
Okay. So here's a really cool thing. And my friend Jeremy Treat of Reality LA, that's a church, Jeremy came up. Jeremy was the first one I saw to do it. I think it was something that he came up with, and I know it spread quite a bit. But he came up with the idea to just encourage people to take a couple of minutes and just to do a video, even like a selfie or whatever, a video of your testimony, just a brief one, how Jesus changed my life, I think is the hashtag, or Jesus changed my life is the hashtag. Just do it and then post it. And just, I know a bunch of other churches jumped on board with it, but I think I was talking to the guys in the UK, and we were just talking about how amazing is it? Because we were talking about the other side of things. People locked in their houses in the UK. Domestic violence is up really high right now because of the lockdown. And then another friend in Scotland was talking about the suicide rate of a young person across the road from him, jumped off a bridge, killed himself the other day in relation to all of this. So anyway, we were just talking about just whatever we can do to just inundate everything with the gospel, so that it's almost like where anybody turns, they just, oh no, there's the gospel again. It's right there. It's here, there, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And but I think that Jesus changed my life thing is a super cool way to do it too. So all you got to do is just take your phone and just look at it and just tell your story in a couple of minutes about how Jesus changed your life, and then post it.
Yeah.
And got to using those things.
That's fantastic. I've heard a lot of great things about Jeremy Treat and the church up there.
Oh, yeah. Jeremy's great.
I'd love to go up and visit there sometime. So keep up the great work there, Jeremy, and you're in an important part of our state.
Yeah, and Jeremy's friend, who was the founder of that church, Tim Chaddock. Tim is in London, and he planted Reality London. Tim had the coronavirus.
Did
he? So he's finally through it, and he posted today.
And Tim's Mike's brother, right?
Yeah, Tim's Mike's brother, yeah. And he posted today, he posted some nice pictures. He was out taking a walk, and he said, man, how great it is to take a walk again and just to be out. And it looked like it was nice and sunny and a pretty day. So thank God that Tim's better, doing well. My friend Dave Sylvester told me today he had the coronavirus, which I didn't even know.
Really?
And they had a number of interesting thing. He's the director of the Bible College in the UK, and they had a number of students that all got sick. He got sick, his daughter got sick, and it ended up they all had the virus, but they didn't know it until 3 of the kids at the school were Americans. They came home and got tested and found out that they had the virus. So Dave explained he had the symptoms. He had the no smelling thing. He had the dry mouth and all of that. And he's fine now. He's doing great. So,
what's the one thing both of you guys look most forward to about not being on, what do we call this, quarantine, except for going to church. Because I know that would be the the thing that everyone's going to be excited as Christians just to gather up. But besides that, what would you guys say?
There's so much.
Yeah.
But the newest thing for me is the face mask thing. I just started doing that yesterday.
You're gonna be glad
I cannot get used to this. I'm not wearing it right now because otherwise you wouldn't be able to hear me on the radio. But, it's just I went out shopping with it today.
Yeah.
And for weeks I've seen everybody else wearing one, and I thought it will not get to that point.
Yeah.
But I'm here now, and I wore it, and
Well,
the peripheral vision thing is so odd. I can't get used to not being able to.
but you can kind of just think, I mean, if you think of like all the Star Wars movies, they've always got something like, not a mask, but they got something covering from their face, like Kylo Ren or even back to Darth Vader. You can kind of just imagine yourself as one of those characters when you're out there, and it'll probably help, probably
just part of the galaxy and working against the dark forces.
I'll hum the song as I'm walking down the aisle. It'll be great.
Well, here's what I'm looking forward to. My wife had her birthday last Saturday, and we were going to have a wonderful birthday party for her. And all of my kids and grandkids were going to be here. And obviously that all got nixed. So I'm looking forward. That's going to be the top of the list beside going back to church is to get all the family together and just hang out and spend some time together. So my wife had her birthday on the 4th. One of my son's birthdays on the 16th. Another son's birthday's on the 19th. And my grandson's birthday was on March 28th. And then my daughter's birthday, one of my daughters, her birthday is on the day that supposedly everything goes back to semi-normal, May 3rd. So we're hoping May 3rd we can just have a big
giant party.
Birthday bash. Maybe it'll have to be May 4th, but
Yeah.
May the 4th be with you.
May the 4th be with you. I'm looking forward to getting back to the gym.
Yeah.
That has been, we're working out in the garage and we're just trying to figure out how to make the most of this. But I can just tell, I'm going to be way weaker when I go back.
Yeah, I could notice already that you were looking kind of
sickly,
frail, and kind of your muscle tones just kind of disappeared.
We thought maybe you had the COVID or something because wow,
there is a lot of atrophy, and I'm looking forward to eating at our local wet market. And I think that no, I'm just kidding. That would not be. No. Hey, that's one thing that's sad though. They got to do something about that because. When you think about these wet markets getting opened up again, I mean, that's really bothersome, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that should not be allowed.
They really should just shut them down.
Yeah, they should. If you're wanting to eat some of these things, my goodness, I mean, isn't enough to see what's happened.
Yeah, so. And I'm suspecting that they might be shut down here, anyway, in the States, but probably not worldwide.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And did you partake of... Can you eat weird exotic stuff? In the past, like do you have a thick stomach? Because I can't hardly eat.
Do you have a thick stomach? I've never heard it quite put that way.
Well, I got a weak stomach, right?
No, I do not eat that stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I am with you on that. I don't eat bugs. I don't eat exotic animals. Or plants.
Yeah.
No, I just give me the basic stuff.
Exactly.
Right. 888-564-6173. We were talking about church and how we can't wait for that to get back to normal. Yeah. And this weekend is supposed to be, our big celebration. Good Friday, Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
And even that's going to be different.
That is going to be different, yeah. I mean, I was thinking ever since I've been a Christian, which is 40 plus years, I was thinking I have been to church every single Easter Sunday for 40 years. I can't think of a single Easter I have ever missed. Many of those Easters I actually preached, or all of them for the most part. I participated in some, kind of a sense of leading the service. So yeah, this is pretty extraordinary, really. To not be able to gather.
Yeah,
and we've been trying to be somewhat creative with even our video thing. So every year we do, Brian, we do a sunrise service. We've done that for decades now. And so we're trying to figure out how to pull off a sunrise service. Obviously, we can't have people at it, but, we're thinking we're going to go outside. I don't want to invite people to get up and watch a sunrise service in the morning if I'm still in bed and it's just videotaped and we're going to show it at 6.
Right.
I couldn't blame anybody if they decided not to do that. So I would actually be out there, in the wild, trying to do some kind of a live thing. So, but the frustrating thing is, have you guys noticed that the weather, my Apple weather thing, which is what I use all the time, and it's pretty consistent, but it keeps changing all the time. So yesterday we planned everything for Sunday sunrise because the app said it was going to be clear on Sunday. Now today you get up and the app says, nope, it's going to rain on Sunday.
Really?
Jeez.
Yeah. So anyway, but it could change again. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get a nice clear day.
My Android weather says rain.
Rain on Sunday. Yeah. Yeah.
That's too bad.
So Bobby, here's a question though. It is Holy Week traditionally.
Yeah.
Passion Week. People call it different things. This morning, I read Matthew's account of the crucifixion and the resurrection, and I kind of try to do that every year. Just take those accounts in the Gospels leading up to Good Friday. But what do you think about, we're moving toward those 2 days, beside Christmas, obviously, Easter, and in some ways Easter is even more, I think, specifically Christian. I mean, they're both Christian. Obviously, the birth of Christ is a Christian event, but Easter really gets down to the resurrection, and because some people believe, well, Jesus was born, that's fine. Jesus was a great person. Celebrate his birthday, that's great. Not everybody believes he rose from the dead. So people who celebrate Easter are saying, yeah, I believe in the resurrection. So as we move toward that, what are you thinking about?
I really am hoping to just communicate that if you're out there wondering if Jesus rose from the grave or if you think he didn't, do your best to try to look at the evidence, because I really feel like this is the crux of our faith. I mean, even Paul says it, right? If Christ is not raised, then we are still in our sins and our faith is futile. We see that in 1 Corinthians 15. If Jesus rose from the grave, then Jesus was buried. And if Jesus was buried, Jesus died. And if Jesus died, Jesus lived. And when Jesus lived, he said that he was going to die, be buried, and rise again. Yeah. And so I would say this faith of ours, it all hinges on whether or not Jesus rose from the grave. And fortunately for us, we have, number one, we have great evidences, right? Like the fact that women were the first to show up at the tomb. If you were trying to fabricate the story, why would you include women being the first eyewitnesses when it took 2 women's votes to equal 1 man's vote in that culture? Multiple appearances, the life change. How do you explain Paul the Apostle and what happened there? And then all of the objections that people try to give, like the swoon theory that he just passed out, or that people were hallucinating. There is just so much evidence for the resurrection that in my doubts, I couldn't explain it away. And I thought to myself, well, if Jesus rose, then what did he say about the Old Testament? Well, he affirmed it. And he said the news to come. So the resurrection can get me back to my belief in the Old Testament. It can get me to believing and trusting that if Christ affirmed the Old Testament, then I can trust that the same process that the Old Testament was brought about by, that the New Testament will be brought about by, in his second coming, he would affirm that New Testament process took place as well. And so I think so much can happen to us in our life, in our faith, in our strength, in our spiritual lives, by just recognizing that the tomb became empty so that our life could become full.
Yeah. And this Sunday, this Sunday, probably like no other Sunday ever, this message is going to go out. Every single preacher who is preaching to any kind of an audience online is going to be giving that same message. And undoubtedly, like we always do, including in it, reasons to believe. I was reading in Matthew today, and it's so interesting because after Jesus dies and is buried, the Jewish leadership, they come to Pontius Pilate and they say, now that guy said, He said he's going to rise again.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
So we got to make sure that this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Give us some guards. Give us some help. And Pilate says, okay, you got a guard. And so a Roman guard goes and they seal the tomb. So, when you seal a tomb with a Roman guard, nobody's going to get in or out of there. Nobody's going to get in or out of there unless you're the Son of God.
That's right.
And Jesus got out of there. They came on that first day of the week, and the stone was rolled away. And the soldiers, of course, they fainted. They fell over like dead men, at the appearance of the angel. But man, you just read that and you think, wow, this is just so powerful.
Yeah, it is amazing. And those stones could weigh an enormous amount. I mean, I've heard up to 2 tons before. I mean, that would be talking 4,000 pounds. I've heard, maybe 2,000 pounds. I mean, these are really heavy stones, and I'm sure the size differed depending upon how big the cut of the tomb was. Yeah. But obviously, that's a really neat story, and it was a rich man's tomb, which would require, I would imagine, a big stone.
Yeah. So I just saw the Getty thing come up on the screen. What was that? Because I sent you that, right?
You sent me that. Yes. Yeah. Our friends Keith and Kristen Getty, you sing their music all the time. They are going to be doing something in less than 45 minutes on their Facebook page. They've done this a few weeks now. Every Tuesday at 7:15 Central Time, which is 5:15. Oh, I gave the wrong. It's less than 2 hours from now, not less than an hour from now. It's at 7:15 Central, which is 5:15 Pacific, 6:15 Mountain, 8:15 Eastern. I think I got all that right. I think I did. Anyway, go to gettymusic.com and you can find out all the details. But what they do is it's Keith and Kristen and their 2 daughters, I think.
Yeah,
and they sing hymns on Facebook. I mean, how cool is that? So check that out. I put a link on our Facebook page. So that starts in less than 2 hours from right now at 5:15 p.m. Pacific time. Do the math to figure out what time zone it is for you. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is something going on this Thursday, the Pacific Justice Institute. We've been talking about this, the CARES Act that was recently signed into legislation. And this is for business leaders, church leaders, Christian school leaders. And it's a Zoom conference that our friend Brad Dacus is going to be doing. Brad is from the president of the Pacific Justice Institute. And this is for churches and ministries to find out how they can obtain financial relief through the new federal funding via the CARES Act. So if you want information on that, you can go to Brad Dacus's Pacific Justice Institute website. It's pji.org. You've got to register ahead of time. It's this Thursday. There's 3 different conferences, so you want to make sure you register for the right one. There's one for church leaders, Christian school leaders, and business leaders. Sign up for the one that you need to go to. I think it's all free. Get all the details at pji.org.
Great.
And that's it for my public service announcements.
All right.
I might announce that.
That'll be good. That'll be helpful because there are a lot of people that are wondering just about the details of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we got some good questions lining up for...
Yes, we do, but we have one here I want to take from Facebook, see if we can answer it in 90 seconds, and it has to do with this Sunday. Andrew wants to know, how can I give my family communion this Sunday at home?
Well, I'll tell you what, Andrew. That's a great question. And this Sunday on our live service online, we are going to do that very thing. We're going to have communion, and our executive pastor, Jordan Taylor, is going to be with his family, and they are going to have a family communion together. And that's how we're going to demonstrate. That'll be for the Good Friday service, actually.
Okay.
Good Friday at noon. So Jordan's going to sort of model how do you do this? Because some people are wondering, like, gosh, how can I do this? I've only done communion at church.
Yeah.
How do I do it at home?
They do everything for me there at church. How do I do it?
Yeah, so Jordan's going to model it with his family. So check that out at live.cccm.com on Friday at noon, Good Friday service, because we always have a communion service with that. And then if you want to do that on Sunday as well, then you kind of have a model. You can see how to do it.
All right, Andrew, thank you for sending in that question on facebook.com/pastorsperspective. Again, that's this Friday, the Good Friday service at 12 noon Pacific time, Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, not on campus, but on your computer, at your house, at your den, your backyard, wherever you're watching, live.cccm.com. And then Sunday morning, the Easter sunrise service at 6 a.m. Pacific time. live.cccm.com for all the details. All right, we'll get to your questions in just a little bit here on Pastor's Perspective, 888-564-6173. Do I have to put my mask on for the next 2.5 minutes? I do? Okay.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues with your question to 1-888-564-6173. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today on Pastor's Perspective, whether you're on the radio or on the Facebook or the YouTube or catching us later on a podcast. We are here right now, live, 3:30 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday to answer your calls on the Bible and the Christian faith. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and Bobby Conway from OneMinuteApologist.com are here. And if we're ready, guys, we'll answer some questions here. I've got another one from Facebook. This one's from Lisa. A couple of our kids have gotten involved with what I think is Oneness Pentecostalism. They don't believe in the Trinity and that salvation is by baptism in the name of Jesus only. They used to attend Calvary Chapel, but now choose to follow this. Any suggestions on how to minister to them besides prayer? And are they saved if they deny the Trinity? What do you guys know about that, Bobby?
Oneness Pentecostal is correct. It's a form of modalism. Modalism is the teaching that you have God the Father in the Old Testament manifested, and then in the New Testament, the life of Jesus, and then the Spirit today. And so like these three masks that God wears. So in other words, it's a singular person monotheism that shows up in different modes throughout progressive revelation of time. And so the kind of monotheism that we believe in would be a triune monotheism. That is one God in essence revealed in three persons. So what makes it heretical is the fact that it does not ascribe to the same God that we believe in, because we believe in one God revealed in three persons that are distinct, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Yet this belief does not believe in one God in three persons existing eternally extinct of one another. And so that's where it's problematic. The question of, is somebody saved in that way? Well, I mean, that is a hard question, because you think about the Bible. We don't have a book of the New Testament called the Trinity. The understanding of the Trinity was something that was being fleshed out with the new books of the Bible, the apostles' teaching, and we would see like at the Council of Nicaea or at the Council of Chalcedon, Chalcedon in 451, Nicaea in 325. Chalcedon would really put some good emphasis on the dual natures of Christ. Nicaea would help us to understand the three personages within the Godhead. And so you had these different types. You have the Athanasian creed as well. So you have these great creeds that were put together. I think the Athanasian creed was like in 381. But you have these different creeds that were put together. But keep in mind, those dates that I'm giving you are several hundred years after the time of the resurrection of Christ, the beginning of the church at Pentecost. So bringing all this together, what does somebody need to do to be saved? Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved. So I think when the Philippian jailer believed on the Lord Jesus Christ and was saved, he couldn't articulate a view of the Trinity, and neither could I. But I do think a part of responsible discipleship is, if we are a true follower of Jesus and we are discipled according to the doctrine, that our spirit will bear witness with a triune God. And if it rejects a triune God, then maybe then we have to kind of go back and understand who this Jesus is we claim to believe in.
Who was that? That was Lisa. Thank you for sending in your question on Facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective.
Yeah, and Bobby, on that one, that's been a hard one, because I feel like I always draw sort of a distinction between that view, the Jesus only view, and then the view that's held by the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, which is rooted in Arianism, and I see that one as the Jehovah's Witness view, denying the Trinity, but also denying the divinity of Christ. Mm-hmm. and
and the divinity of the Spirit,
and the Spirit, yeah, and then also Arius, his whole idea was that basically it was rooted in the idea that God could never come really near to man. God was so transcendent that you couldn't bridge that gap and so forth. So it was a major theological debate rooted in some pretty serious ideas. Where the modalism, even though modalism is wrong, to me it doesn't seem as opposed. So like a Oneness Pentecostal, for example, they love Jesus and believe in his divinity, even though they just got it wrong, right?
Yeah.
So to me, I just see it as different. So because people have asked me this question plenty of times about, are these people saved? That's the question that so often comes about. I tend to think that you can be saved and hold to modalism, but you can't be saved and hold to like an Arian view, where you're actually against. The Arian view is against the biblical revelation of not just the Trinity, but the divinity of Christ, to me, which is even the more serious issue.
Yeah, the interesting thought for me is, if Jesus is manifested now in the Spirit, then, there's a lot of thoughts that come to my mind, and I don't want to confuse our audience with my own confusion. But I would say this, though. That's a fair statement, right?
Glad to hear that.
But I would want to say, you take a large majority of the church, and they're gonna not be able to articulate the Trinity, even if they end up in modalism or if they end up using other faulty illustrations of the Trinity, like the egg white, the yolk, and So I really think that in that way there is grace, and I hope that my ability to go into the presence of God is going to be my profession of Jesus, not if I can articulate the Nicene Creed properly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Is Jesus homoousios or homoiousios with the Father? Same substance or similar substance? Yeah. Well, it's a massive difference, and we want to be able to talk about that. Gets into Arianism, which, by the way, that's what Nicene Creed is dealing with there. But all that to say, I don't want to be the guy who sits in judgment over people's salvation. And I think there's a lot of people that, if they're given the opportunity, they go, "Oh yeah, this is what I believe." Orthodox triune
and
Christianity.
the way I've kind of defined it is, if I think you can be ignorant of the Trinity and be saved. Because, like you said, I think most people are ignorant in some sense or another. Even us. Okay, we're trying to figure this out. But I don't think you can be against it. I think when you take a position against something, then I think that's where you cross a line and you get into trouble. So, and that's where I see, again, the difference between the Kingdom Hall and the Jesus-only people. Kingdom Hall is they're against Christ's divinity. That's their whole agenda, is to make sure that that Jesus is not divine. Yeah. That, there's just Jehovah. Yeah. And that's why they're the Jehovah's Witnesses. So.
Yeah, good.
To the phones we go, 888-564-6173. Here's Rick in Fontana. You've got a marriage question. What is it, Rick?
Yeah, hi. How you guys doing?
Doing well.
Good.
How can we help you?
Okay, yeah. I have a two-part question. I kind of already know what your answer is going to be for part one.
Okay, then just ask us part two.
Okay, well, I'll just give you both. My question is marriage important?
Okay, and question two?
And then part two is, if marriage is important, then why do a lot of the churches emphasize more of not single ministries, but they focus more on a weekly men's ministry or a woman's ministry, a drug and alcohol ministry, or like homeless ministry, gang ministries, but you never really see them emphasize a weekly marriage ministry?
All right. Brian, what would you say?
Okay. Well, I would say, in answer to your first question, yes, marriage is important, especially if you're married. It's really important if you're married. Marriage isn't important in the sense that everybody has to get married, but if you are married, it's obviously very important, and it needs to be something that you see as important and a priority in your life. But to answer your question about these why you see this in churches and so forth. Well, for one, you would assume that sort of the general services that are held throughout the week, everything you mentioned is kind of a specialized service, the singles, the men's, the women's, the college group or whatever. But the general services where you are expecting everybody to attend, well, you're just assuming that, that's where the married couples are coming. Now, a lot of churches have marriage ministries as well. We've certainly had one for decades, and we still do today. So I don't see that there is that big of a discrepancy against married ministries. Almost every church I can think of has some sort of a marriage ministry. So,
I think that's a good point. I was feeling the same thing as the question was asked. I think a lot of churches have marriage ministries. It could just be maybe the influence of churches around the individual asked the question. It could be that perhaps that's been his pool of experience, but I can say as one who's been a pastor myself for many years, and Brian obviously is very networked to pastors, and I think their churches are doing a much greater job today compared to, think about all the material that came out with Dobson and Smalley and some of their emergence, and now you've got so much of this marriage material. The church used to really struggle being equipped to talk about this stuff. I really feel like the church has done a great job in comparison to much of church history as it relates to this. More than ever before.
Yeah, probably in the last 50 years. It's just skyrocketed. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Rick, are you a married man?
Yes.
And does your church have a marriage ministry?
Yeah, but it's more of like an occasional marriage ministry where it's, they have like, it's not a weekly thing. It's like, it's more for like fellowship with other couples.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, again, we think, as we said, there's plenty of marriage ministry opportunity out there. There's tons of books written on the subject. There's all kinds of things you can listen to, audio recordings, and in some ways, your marriage is your responsibility. So you got to make sure you're doing everything you can to make sure your marriage is flourishing and the kind of marriage that God intends it to be. Christ loving the church. Husbands loving the wife like Christ loved the church, and so forth. So, my wife and I, we've been married for a long time now, coming up on 40 years here, and we've never been to a marriage ministry really, other than occasionally to an event or something. But we're still married and we're doing pretty good, and we work on it ourselves. And so, I think that's really the main thing you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, and like Rick's case, he was saying, I think his church has a men's ministry and a women's ministry. Yeah. So if Rick's going to the men's meeting and his wife is going to the women's meeting, and then they kind of come together and discuss, and each one of them kind of follows through, and that should be okay. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to Joe in Sacramento. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Joe.
Hey, how you guys doing?
All right,
good.
How are you?
All right, so I'm going to try to get this. It's confusing in my head, so hopefully I can say it right to you guys. I consider myself a baby Christian, even though I'm 53, but I'm really trying to learn a lot. But I'm really concerned about everybody going to heaven. And one of the things I think about all the time is I was fortunate to be born in a family that believes in God, and so I had that background. But what if I was born a Hindu, or I was born in a Muslim family? I would be raised like that, and I feel like they don't have a chance to go to heaven like we do. And I know the Bible says that everybody has a chance. So I don't know if I'm asking the right question, but can you guys explain that to me? Kind of like.
Okay, Bobby, what would you say?
Do you understand? Yeah.
Well, some people will deny the belief of Christianity on accounts of what is known as the genetic fallacy. And the genetic fallacy is the fallacy of dismissing the trustworthiness of something based on where it was discovered or where it originated. So the argument would be like, well, Christianity, can't be true because the only people that are really Christians are those who are in Christian populations. And had a Christian been born in Saudi Arabia, they would have been a Muslim. And had they been born in India, they would be a Muslim. And that is to commit the genetic fallacy, because the truth of Christianity is true, whether or not, it takes ground in certain regions or not, or it's false if it can be falsified. We would say that we believe it's true. So here's how I would answer that. We're going to be held accountable for the knowledge that we do have. Nobody's going to be without excuse. Romans 1:20. The Lord of the earth will do what is right. He's a just God. We see that in Genesis before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, that God's a just God. He's not willing that any should perish. We see this in 2 Peter chapter 3. Not willing that any should perish. That he loves the whole world, John 3:16. And so when we think about God being loving, just, not willing that any should perish, we consider that no one's going to be without excuse. That lets us know that if we trust that God is good and we trust that he's just, that is what we can look to of the God of Scripture. Now, I had that same burden in my own life, traveling in the world and seeing people going, oh my goodness, what are we going to do with this? I do think that if somebody's never been given the information piece of the gospel, then it's very plausible that God will hold them accountable for the knowledge that they do have. How can you, go to hell for not believing in Jesus if you never heard about Jesus? Well, you're going to be held accountable for the knowledge that you do have. General revelation, that you look up and you see that God created us, Psalm 19, Romans chapter 1. And then if in your conscience you recognize that you have sinned against this God who's holy, you can see how somebody in another culture could say, God, I don't know exactly who you are, but I believe that you're the creator, and I believe you're perfect, and I believe that I'm not, and I want to be where you are. And by faith, I just ask you to take my limited knowledge and help me. How God in his goodness would still be able to save that person because of what Jesus still accomplished, even though they might not have the information piece. So everybody could still get to heaven and be saved on account of what Jesus did in the atonement, even if they didn't have the information piece, because God applied it to them through the faith that they did have in the knowledge that was given to them.
Joe, what do you think?
That's outstanding. Yeah, and I can just say in my own experience, so I'm just coming back to I just decided I wanted a relationship with God. And what's really helped me is apologetics. And I know, Bobby, you do that, and I listen to your stuff. But it really helped me because I used to, my brain just couldn't, take it all in. And then when I started looking at birds and animals and all the fish to see, and so that's one way I kind of justify that, the Hindus and all that, because they see the same world that I see. And to say that, I think it takes more faith to be an atheist. I just don't see how they could be an atheist.
Right. Yeah. Good point, Joe. Thanks for calling us today, Joe. Here on Pastor's Perspective. Next, we're going to go to Georgia, talk to Anil. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Anil.
Yes, sir. This is Anil, and I hope you follow my accent. I have an Indian accent.
So far, so good.
You sound great.
Okay, sir, my question is, I am a believer. I do believe in Christ, and I have accepted Christ as my own Savior, everything. But supposing in a scenario where A and B fight, and A shoots B, B dies, A goes to prison, and when he's in the prison, he gets saved there by the prison ministry. Then he's supposed to go to heaven, right?
Right.
Then, in a human way, how can we show the justification in this, and how can we explain this to a non-Christian friend of ours in India?
Okay, Pastor Brian, what do you say?
So, but let's go back. So then, the person that dies is not a Christian,
yes,
right? Is that right? The person who dies is not a Christian.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a good question, and it's one of those that you do have to think through, and I don't know that you can come up with an absolute, this is exactly how to explain that. But I would say that, you have to think about the fact that God knows the end from the beginning. So God knows everybody's destiny. He doesn't predestine people to damnation, but he knows that people are going to either be saved or not be saved. So the person who dies, gets killed, never receives the gospel and perishes. Well, the fact of the matter is they would have done that regardless. I mean, that wasn't like they got shot and killed, and if they would have lived longer, then they would have been able to become a Christian. God knows all of that. So you would have to conclude from that that person would have never responded to the gospel. So if you conclude that, then I don't think you would have the problem with this other person finding forgiveness for the crime or the sin that they committed. And so that's one of the ways that I would think about it and look at it. God knows all things, and there's no one that's going to perish because somehow they slipped through God's fingers, or somehow God, dropped the ball in some way, and dang, this guy got lost. We were going to save him later, but shoot, that guy killed him, and blew the plan. So that's never going to happen. But I say that, but Bobby, maybe you read this. I don't know if you ever read any of Rob Bell's stuff, but Rob Bell actually in his book, I think it was God Wins. He tells a story of how, he presumably somebody gets saved because a missionary has a flat tire. They get a blowout and they never make it to the guy. So the guy never gets saved and he dies and he has to go to hell because of the flat tire. And so it's kind of the same dilemma that we're talking about here. But it doesn't work that way. Nobody misses out on salvation because the missionary got a flat tire. Yeah. And nobody misses out on salvation because they died what seemed to be prematurely. And then going to the other person, though, that does get saved, well, this just shows, like Jesus said, that all manner of sin will be forgiven with the exception of the one sin of rejecting him. Because all of those sins, even the sin of killing that person, was paid for by Jesus on the cross. So if somebody repents, genuinely, seeks God's mercy and forgiveness, then that forgiveness comes to them justly because the price has already been paid by Jesus on the cross.
See, Brian, I think you obviously haven't read my book then. Hell, Rob Bell, and What Happens When People Die is an apologetic rebuttal to Love Wins.
Oh, I didn't read it.
But you know what? It's so dated now. Don't bother with
it. And you didn't read my book, God Wins, which is a rebuttal to Rob Bell's book as well.
I think you guys need to trade books and do a report, an
Maybe
essay.
we can put them together and come up with a new
That's right.
There you go.
Well, Rob, that was part of his thing too. Remember talking about Gandhi, how in the world could somebody as good as Gandhi end up in hell? And this is where he ends up with what I referred to as a post-mortem, nuanced, purgatorial, inclusivist view, which is a mouthful,
you repeat
right?
that again, please?
Well, post-mortem.
That was going to be the name of his book, and then his publisher said, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, well, a lot of people were saying he was a universalist, and I said, not quite. Post-mortem, nuanced, purgatorial, inclusivist. Yeah. So just about everybody's going to get in a post-mortem, purgatorial experience that will bring people to have their hearts softened by the love of God, and they'll be brought in. But to allow and concede for free will, he recognized that some people could potentially reject God.
Yeah, but by the time I was finished with Rob's book and reading it over several times and then responding to it, I realized he didn't even know what he believed in the end. He seemed very confused because initially everybody thought that he's denying hell. Yeah. But then when you read the book, it's like, well, he kind of does give room for that for some people.
Yeah.
But it seemed like he really didn't know exactly what he believed.
Yeah. So God wins?
God wins for sure.
That's right.
That's right.
I believe it.
Now, some people listening might, this whole thing about eternal life and everything, and they're wondering, about God and
But
hell.
let's ask our caller if that helped at all.
Sure. Anil?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Did that help?
You're trying to say that the first person who was killed he was not exposed to the gospel, you try to say?
No. I wasn't saying he's not exposed to the gospel. I'm saying that he obviously didn't receive the gospel, but he never would have received the gospel. If he died in that place without receiving the gospel, we can't assume that, well, if he would have lived longer or not had this misfortune of being killed, he maybe would have got saved. That would be a wrong conclusion, I think.
That is to say that God has created the best possible world for us to live in, and given the best possible world that we live in, all of us will have an opportunity to stand before God without excuse. And that best possible world doesn't mean God should have created another world, in that I should have lived more years in order to receive it. Rather, the years I had was enough.
Right. But right now, you can receive Christ and not have to even worry about any of these possibilities. Just open your heart, ask Jesus to come in, and he will.
Yes, he will.
That's right.
You can read more about that, share it with your friends, calvarychapel.com. Click How to Know God. It's all there for you. That's all the time we have on today's program. Join us again tomorrow from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. For Brian Broderson and Bobby Conway, I'm Brian Perez. Have a great night. Good night. God bless. And wash your hands. Don't touch your face and all that.
Thanks for listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/pastorsperspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.